Warning for the Democrats and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer, who's on the other side of the camera. And our special guests today, Delegate Matt Morgan and Delegate Brian Chisholm. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Great to be back.
So this podcast, everyone, it's called Dire Warning for the Democrats. Before we even talk about that, because it's pretty bad for the Democrats, just saying, I have to put this up there. Saturday Night Live, which is hard to believe it's even comedy anymore, but it has to always be like the woke comedy. So Saturday Night Live has decided to always make fun of working people. That's their thing, right? They never make fun of the elites. They never make fun of Democrats. They just make fun of a certain group of people that they think aren't worthy of being in America. Well, Saturday Night Live last Saturday made fun of truck drivers. So Jake Gyllenhaal was the guest. We have the first of two clips on this. I just want you to listen to the first clip before we go to Brian and Matt to talk about this. And here is the clip.
Truck stops have the wildest stuff.
Yeah, like my other car is a gun.
Yeah, and who are the weirdos still buying CDs?
Well, truckers, that's who.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, this one right here is a collection of hits by my favorite truck driving crooner, Johnny Goblin. Yeah, I'm talking about Truck You, You Truckin' Truck. 42 songs all about trucking.
So basically, it's two people in a truck stop. They stop there and they're like the cool elitist liberals. And they go and they run into a trucker. And they start talking about the stuff that's for sale in the truck stop, making fun of the stuff, as well as the truckers themselves. Brian, thoughts on this?
This is just creatively lazy, but it does point out that we do have two Americas today, right? We have two Americas. We have, and it's no longer Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. It's the elitist and the government class against the blue collar workers or the people that want to be independent. And this is what they point out. I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, we used to have commercials on all the time. Hey, you can be a trucker and you can make X amount. And people took pride in that kind of work and people that wanted to get up every morning and go to work and produce something. But that's not the way that these elitists look at it. They hate people that are independent of their government. And the ones that want to make it on their own, that's what they dislike because it takes power away from them. And to put out something as ridiculously and unfunny as this points that out. It's an elitist against everybody
So they're
else.
still going after the deplorables. So basically,
Right.
They're still saying there's a group of people in the United States. They are the deplorables. They're awful people. They're not worthy of being here. They're not worthy of being in political power. And then there are the elites, as you just said, Brian, Matt.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. They're still going after the deplorables. I mean, for a group of people that always want to talk about being compassionate and feelings, they never go after their own. They only go after people they feel are lesser than them. And right now they're going after truck drivers, which, I mean, last time I checked, we kind of need some truck drivers. They should be a little bit more respectful for truck drivers because I think a truck driver just took out their Senate president nearby New Jersey last November.
Oh, that's right. The truck driver in New Jersey took out the Senate. He beat the Senate president, who was a woke Democrat. And then this fellow who's a truck driver ran a campaign on nothing and beat him.
Yeah, I think he spent like $500 or $2,500 compared to like $250,000 or something by the Senate president. So yeah, I mean, he got whipped. It was almost a shame to lose another truck driver though. As you know, the stores are empty and
maybe the Senate president can drive a truck now. You know,
And
they
I think
can
that's a
switch positions.
good point, Matt. I think it's deeper than that. I think they like the supply chain issue problems because they hate any sort of truck. They hate any sort of fossil fuel driven vehicle. They like pain. And you and I know this. This is a party and this is a group of elitist people that want to enact revenge on a certain group of society. And they believe, hey, you deserve this. And these stupid truckers are the ones delivering these products to these deplorables.
I do think it's a little bit funny they're making fun of truck drivers because, I mean, the three of us do this show and politicians and stuff, but we always didn't live that life. Could you see any one of these clowns try to change a tire themselves? I mean, this is the reason why AAA was invented. If it was for people like on Saturday Night Live, because they couldn't possibly hope to save themselves.
You know, I had to drive a truck once up to New York, and it was a it was a huge truck. And I was on the BQE. So I don't know if anyone out there has ever been on the BQE, you feel like you're going to die just in your car. And in a truck, you're just terrified. So I had to do that because I was going up to my in-laws' house and helping them. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, we had one of these already available to us here in Maryland. So we drove all the way up there on the turnpike. And then I got on the BQE and I was just terrified. And I'm just thinking to myself, these guys really keep people safe and they get stuff from one place to another. I just wish for once the liberals and the left could stand in the shoes of others. But we're talking about SNL, making fun of truck drivers, and the fact that as conservatives, we're not trying to cancel comedy. Oh, no, we like comedy. What we're saying is just like, where is the comedy on SNL? So we have the second clip of this series, and here it is.
Scoot past you.
Songs include fender bending hits like Trucker's Life.
I'm peeing in a bottle and I'm peeing in a thermos and I'm peeing in a cup and I'm peeing in a bucket and I'm peeing in a diaper and I'm peeing out the window. The wind blows it back in my face.
So that's the truck driver singing, okay? And they're making fun of, SNL, of truck drivers who are trying to get from one place to another, probably because of the supply chain crisis, because they're told we need these items to get to their destination. So the truck driver then decides to pee in a bottle while driving. And so that song was supposed to make fun of the very people who are getting things from place one to place two, because they're deciding, rather than stopping at a truck stop, to actually pee in a bottle so they can get to place. So naturally, all of the liberals, the left, Matt, are going, isn't that funny? These deplorables peeing in the truck.
So funny. So funny. Look, these are the meanest people I've ever met in the name of helping others. Like all their policies, we're going to help this person, we're going to help that person. And look, they need to be held accountable for their policies, right? I mean, it's resulted in a supply line shortage. It's just really, really troublesome, and they're not good people at all. They need to pay a hefty price come November.
So Brian, is it funny when you make fun of, look, you can laugh and it's like, haha, whatever, but is it really funny that this is the group that they decided to target at SNL?
Well, they targeted it because they feel very safe in doing it, because they feel like they're never going to meet a trucker. They probably have never met a trucker in their life. They have no idea how hard it is. This is probably one of the most difficult and dangerous jobs to do. You're moving tons of metal and steel down a highway at 60 to 80 miles an hour just so you can get somewhere. And the reason that a lot of these guys have to sleep in their trucks, they're always sleeping on the side. Maybe they do have to go to the bathroom in the truck, because their job is to get a product from point A to point B in a certain amount of time. And they can't just stop whenever they want, stay in the Four Seasons like all these elitists do, have a nice bottle of wine, go to bed, and then get up at 10 a.m. These guys are working probably 18 hours a day.
Exactly.
And they have to do whatever it takes to get the job
I'm not
done.
sure they're allowed to drive for 18 hours, but of course, as you and I both know, they probably do, because especially now, I'm sure they're breaking a lot of the rules. So we're going to play this game now with this skit, okay? SNL makes fun of those truck drivers. You heard the clips. So if you guys were writers at SNL and you wanted to make fun of truck drivers, but you wanted to actually make it funny by making fun of the left, I want to know what you would do as a writer. So my idea was you would have a trans truck driver. And then, so that would be making fun of the left, right? So the trans truck driver would come in and their butt crack would be showing, and everybody would be all the truck drivers would be guessing, like, is it a guy? Is it a girl? And so that would be funny to me. But NBC can't do that, because NBC, of course, owns SNL.
I picture more of a reality show, personally. I'd like to see the Teamsters get a couple trucks and some of these elitist people, the really, really leftist people that act like, food comes actually from the grocery store, not from the farm, and make them come and like drive the truck there and maybe put cameras everywhere to see how they cope with dealing with that. And then make them unload the truck as well. And just like a elitist challenge, almost like a Survivor.
It's
type
funny.
deal.
I was thinking almost the same thing, but I would do it a little bit differently. Maybe you have the truck driver with an 18-wheeler pull up to somebody's house and just lay on that horn. And then as a race, you have a liberal neighborhood and they all have to run out. And the winner, whoever can get the most packages off the quickest, because I think it'd probably be like an hour before they figured out, first of all, how to open the back door.
Oh, I think it would be hysterical, because I really believe that these people have no transferable job skills. They could not
By these
survive
people, you mean the left,
Yeah,
like
the left. I
the
don't,
woke comedy left.
right. I just don't think they can really do anything. You know, they have their English major degrees and stuff like that. And
Another idea. Here's another
that's
idea.
where it just stops. You know.
Here's another idea. The trans truck driver comes into the truck stop. And then, you know, of course, the regular truck drivers come in, regular, how you like that word, but the everyday truck driver that you would consider to be kind of the norm truck driver walks in, and the trans truck driver says something and he pulls a Will Smith and slaps them. I mean, you know, okay, so this would never happen on NBC or any kind of network. But, you know, what's one more idea? One more idea for what would actually make this skit funny if they really wanted to. Man, I know it's not that easy. I agree.
Maybe the trans truck driver goes into the bathroom and has to figure out which one he wants to go into between the male and the female.
All right, that works.
Because you could get yourself in trouble if you go in the wrong bathroom if they pick you out to be the wrong bathroom.
So here's the thing. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm thinking about the elitist maybe taking his truck driver paycheck and trying to figure out where all his money went.
Yeah.
Something like that.
What's this tax thing here?
Yeah. Who's this FICA son of a bitch?
That's right.
So, you know, here's the thing. SNL, NBC, we love comedy here at Mark and the Millennials. But the thing is, what we're saying is your comedy is always one-sided, which is why it's not funny. Because we're hoping that you're going to do something that's really unique and challenging your own views. But they can't challenge their views because there really is no comedy at NBC. It's just dead.
It goes back to what we've always said, Mark. They have no sense of humor.
That's right.
They can't make fun of themselves, and they just have no sense of humor.
There's some rarities out there, and I think that's part of the sometimes brilliance of Bill Maher. Bill Maher does have the ability to make fun of both sides, and he does it in a very intellectual way. Sometimes I think he's probably too hard on the right, but he does do a pretty good job.
Liberal.
Absolutely.
Well, he's a liberal, but he also understands some of the liberal policies, and some of this woke stuff is so absurd and so ridiculous that it gives him ample material to make fun of.
He does a good job of breaking down the difference between a liberal and what I would consider a progressive or a leftist right now.
Absolutely. So that is SNL makes fun of truck drivers. So next up, podcast listeners, dire warning for Democrats. Oh, this is going to be fun. So the Cook Political Report, which is sort of an insider scoring system of all of the races nationwide, all of the races, they have scored all of the races, and they say there is a dire warning for Democrats. Cook Political Report announced on Friday it was rating a special election for a historically Democrat seat as a toss-up, delivering more bad news for liberals. Governor Greg Abbott ordered the special election for Texas's 34th congressional district on Monday after Democrats holding the seat retired early. The Democrat retired early in that seat. A border district, so Texas' 34th district, borders Mexico, is overwhelmingly Hispanic, as you'd probably expect. The race could serve as an important indicator of how demographics will change in the midterms. So apparently, the candidate who's running, who is a Republican, who is also Hispanic, is ahead in the race. Now, we see all these Hispanics and others, people from all over the world, to be fair, coming across the border from Mexico into Texas and into Arizona and elsewhere. And here's what we know. We definitely know that the Democrats think they're going to vote for them. And suddenly we have this race in Texas where it may not happen. Brian?
I think that the left and the progressives are waking up pretty quickly that the Hispanic community is not their guarantee. And you see it more and more because, once again, the Hispanic community believes in family. They believe in work. That's why they've always been encouraged to come across. And unfortunately, even from some of the Chamber of Commerce, they've wanted this labor to come across, and they're hardworking people. But then they get here and they're like, well, what are they trying to push here? That nobody has to work and all of this anti-family stuff and the anti-blue collar stuff. And I think that's where the real rubber hits the road. Is a lot of the Hispanic families are like, these leftists, they hate me for going to work. They hate me for trying to make a real life here in America.
And you've seen the left counteract that. I mean, we have in our own home state with legislation that tries to remove citizen from every every aspect, serving on boards to, even allowing illegals to vote in some municipality elections. So that's what they're trying to counteract is like, well, if we can get this new generation in here and get them hooked on the free stuff, then they become ours.
And the dirty little secret is most people think, well, every Hispanic you see here is here illegally. Well, that's not true. A lot of them have gone through the citizenship or were born here, and they get tired of this and saying, listen, I had to put in the time.
So this is an interesting point. It's an interesting point, right? Because I actually really believe this too. I think that the Democrats' plan is very simple. We all know already that they want as many Hispanics to come into the country as possible illegally. I also believe, as Matt just said, and I do believe this, that they feel like as fast as they can get them hooked on free healthcare, free housing, free cell phones, which they're giving out, then people are going to go, wait a minute, they give me all this free stuff. I'm going to always vote for Democrat now that I crossed the border.
Well, it's also like a slap in the face to the Democratic agenda because they're getting all this free stuff, healthcare, cell phones, education. Well, they're fleeing places that had free healthcare and free education.
Right.
And it just didn't work out, Like you come to America because it's the land of opportunity, so you can live out the American dream.
Come here legally, yeah.
Yeah. And look, I think Democrats are in for a rude awakening. This is some of how smart the Democratic Party was 20, 30 years ago. Bill Clinton made a lot of these same decisions, and he took a shellacking in 1994.
He did.
Historical. First time Republicans took over the House, and I don't know, like 3 or 4 decades. Newt Gingrich comes in there with the Contract for America. And to Clinton's credit, he reversed course. Yeah, he said, I'm going to work with Republicans. These guys now, I mean, we see it in our own state. They were driving the agenda because they know what's coming in November. It's going to be
They're trying to get as much passed as possible. Much bad
they
stuff
will get
is
on
passed.
with the ship. And where you used to have like Democrats that would be like, this is wrong. We can't do this. Now they just run off the floor. They head for the hills.
Exactly. So get this. In Nevada, there is a danger that the Democrat Party will lose a United States Senate seat. So the Republican Party's goal of taking back the Senate in November could hinge on the ousting of vulnerable incumbent Democrat in the battleground state of Nevada. Now, of course, remember, folks, Nevada has an enormous Hispanic population in the greater Las Vegas area. Why? Because the big corporations wanted to import as many Hispanics as possible to prop up their corporations in this. This is a fact, all right? Okay.
But that's another senator. That's another senator from the machine. I think if you researched her votes, she'd be in lockstep with Chucky Boy there.
Oh, she would. So it says President Joe Biden won by a little over 2 points in Nevada, which is represented by Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, and it's rated by Cook Political Report as a toss-up. So the Democrats are just like Virginia. You have these states that look blue. And the Democrats are convinced they're blue. So they're like, we're going to go all in, as you said, Matt. And as you said, Brian, Democrats, we're going to go all in and try to pass as much of our agenda as possible because we're going to make sure it's blue.
I believe that area of Nevada was one of the last ones to call on election night. If you recall, I think it was several days later. Because
I think the mail-in ballots are still coming in.
That's exactly right. They were still looking for duffel bags. Who hasn't delivered any duffel bags from their van yet? We got to get up. We got to catch up. Because I think even they were shocked because they're like, we have all this Hispanic vote. But I think what the Hispanic population recognizes quickly that the entitlement society is fool's gold because they've seen it either in their own company or they're smart enough to recognize it.
And you see that with Florida. Florida used to, we've grown up for the last 20 years where Florida is always a toss-up state.
Right.
Ron DeSantis won his last election by less than 1 percentage point. And nothing would tell you that Florida is a toss-up state right now.
Oh, no, Florida is in the Republican column solidly, and the Democrats have been trying to flip Florida and flip Texas for decades. That is to say, to make them permanently blue. And obviously the Hispanic population is exactly what they want to do, except that they don't want Hispanics from Cuba because they're anti-communist and pro-Republican.
Well, I think that's also what you're seeing now. The Hispanic population comes here looking for opportunity, like Matt said, and they're fleeing countries where the government has promised to take care of them. And anybody that believes that the government taking care of you is a good idea as a very poor student of history. And I think they start to recognize that. And if you look at some of this free housing, even in America, you show me a free housing block in America, I'm going to show you somewhere you need to get the hell out of real quick.
That's exactly right. I mean, the places where we have free housing and free food through food stamps and free health care through Medicaid, that's a place that you probably don't want to be at real late at night.
No.
Because, I mean, it's the projects.
Yeah.
Exactly. So get this, Wall Street Journal, this just came out. Also about the dire political warnings, school reopening mess drives frustrated parents toward the GOP. Now we're talking about suburban moms, okay? They're talking about in this article in the Wall Street Journal, suburban moms in New Jersey, okay? A reliably blue state. And suburban moms are like, I just have not really voted Republican in a couple of decades, but, I'm just thinking it can't be worse than what the Democrats are doing. So this is what do you think about that, Brian?
It goes back to don't poke Mama Bear, because if you start messing with a mom and her family, they will retaliate and they will come back, and that's what they protect. It's born in them to protect their family and protect their children. And I think that's one of the things that happened during coronavirus, right? All of a sudden, moms and dads got to see what their kids were being taught and said, this is not what we believe in. Why are you teaching my child this? And we're now going to take action where we may have stayed on the sideline before and voted with, we're supposed to be voting with the Democrats. Now they're like, this is not what I believe in. This is not what I want for my family. And they're waking up in droves, and they are going to show up at the polls.
On the issue of parental rights, and by the way, the Wall Street Journal article was just talking about something as simple as schools not being open and kids still wearing masks. And this doesn't even include the parental rights on the other issues, the cultural war issues.
Well, I just think it's the wokeness. The wokeness has awakened the suburban moms. And look, it's about time. I think of media, the left has media dominance. And for a long time, they said, hey, you know what? Those conservatives, those Republicans are evil. They don't care about your kids. They want you to. And right now you're having a situation where it's like, the Republicans out here talking about giving you choice. What school should you go to? Giving you choice about wearing a mask and living your life. And the other side is out here closing things down and forcing you to do everything. And I think it's getting to a point right now where it's like, are the guys talking about individual freedoms? Are they really that bad? Like, who's the radical in this scenario here? And I think they're giving the Republicans a second look. I hope Republicans come through and don't wilt under the pressure, because I know a lot of Republicans.
Well, what we hope is, because we see this in our own state of Maryland, what we hope is at the national level that when Republicans take power, because I don't think it's if, I think it's when, that they actually govern as conservatives and they don't govern as closet Democrats.
Right. They could learn a lot from Maryland. And really, they could learn a lot from
what can they learn from us? I'm not following you on that one.
You're talking about us
governing like closet Democrats.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean the current governor who is a...
But what really, I think
who is a closet...
The message forward for Republicans out here, the message forward and the way forward is you really look at states like have me pumped up like Virginia, where you had guys that came out like... Glenn Youngkin, and said, I'm going to govern from the right center. I'm going to be really articulate. And they've lived up to those promises. And they're doing a great job. And look, I got a whole theory on this. It's much like the African-American community. I don't see why the African-American community votes Democrat year after year. I mean, you look at some of these cities like Detroit, our own city of Baltimore, Philadelphia. I don't understand why they keep voting for them, and Republicans are no different.
Well, this is why the Democrat Party needs Hispanics to cross the border.
Republicans don't live up to what they're promising.
Because they're losing the black vote.
Conservatives won't come out to vote for them either. We've seen that in years past.
So get this, podcast listeners. Culture wars is a real problem for Democrats. So kind of along this podcast, we have been talking about the culture wars because the fact that parents, especially suburban moms and moms across the country, are so upset with what they're doing at the national, state, and local level. Get this. In the Daily Caller, Meet the Press panel predicts culture war will be a real problem for the Democrats in midterm elections. Meet the Press panel, you gotta love this, NBC, Meet the Press, with Chuck Todd, and they have a panel, right? And I love the panel because the panel always has like some like lefty Republican, and then of
Larry
course,
Hogan.
and then and then a bunch of super left, as you would expect, Democrat pundits who are so-called journalists. So Meet the Press panel warned Sunday that the Democrats' current messaging on the culture wars will cause a real problem for the party in the midterm elections. The host discussed a range of social policy issues amongst all of the guests. So podcast listeners, you're going to love it. We have 3 clips on this, right? First, here's Chuck Todd asking, is the right, not the Democrats, he's like, is it the right that is overreaching on this issue? And he asks this to Kimberly Atkins Storr, of course, 3 names, of the Boston Globe. And we have this exchange first. Here it is.
Kimberly, Carlos makes a good point about how the right's so good at baiting the left to defend a specific.
Yep.
Right. And by the way, this bill it has basically, it's about 50-50 support. It's not decisive in either direction.
But it's not, well, also the polling's all over the place because it's very difficult to poll in this,
How do you ask the question?
This kind of way. But it's right. The Republicans they see the win in the gubernatorial race in Virginia, and they say that this is how they can just take this playbook over and over and over again. And the Democrats haven't found any way to message again. I mean, the first thing with DeSantis facing off with Disney, right, is if the Republicans are railing against cancel culture, if a government penalize someone over what they say, that's anti-First Amendment. Like that, the Democrats actually legally are on the winning side of this, yet you haven't heard that message at all.
That was Kimberly Atkins Storr of the Boston Globe saying that House Bill 1557 in Florida, which says that you can't teach transgenderism and sex ed in kindergarten, is stopping free speech. This is a Boston Globe, like one of the storied newspapers of the country. This is what they're saying on NBC. Brian.
To quote the greatest president probably definitely in our lifetime, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so. And they live in this false reality, and they see that America is waking up, but in their circles, in their world, where they have a bunch of yes people around them, I'm not so sure if they really see it all the time, or they just want to live the lie and promote this kind of narrative that it's really the right. The right is one thing the right is not, and we are not nearly as organized as the left. Everything they do has been planned out. And it really is. When you talk about culture wars, and Andrew Breitbart said it best, if you lose the culture, politics just doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter anymore.
Lost them.
That's right.
And that's what they're doing in the school system, going back to the last point. This has been their training camp, and they've had them. And now people are waking up, and people are leaving the public school system in droves.
Thank goodness.
If you see the statistics.
That's what has to happen.
But and what are they saying? Look, I know that I'm paying $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a year in property taxes to pay for a public school system. And so it's there. It's so bad that I'm willing to say, go ahead and take that $12,000 a year from me, and I'm going to take my own hard-earned money and put it either in a home
twice for the same thing.
That's exactly right. And that's how bad of a product it is.
So Kimberly Atkins Storr of the Boston Globe, Matt, said that Republicans apparently don't understand free speech as it relates to House Bill 1557 in Florida. And here's the thing. Here's my question, because she also mentioned Disney in that comment too. So literally what the press is saying, at least Kimberly Atkins Storr of the Boston Globe is saying, is that when you and your children are at Disney, some trans person can come up to your child and go, hey, would you like to come with me to Trans World and groom you some more? I mean, I'm sorry. I almost, rarely curse on this show, but you almost want to throw the F-bomb and say, these people are effed up. I mean, and I never do this because it's just messed up.
Well, we've been saying it for a while, and I think that what's really shocking to them is this is the first time somebody as prominent as a governor, Ron DeSantis, has spoke up against this. And he actually passed legislation to put it in writing. So it's now you have a bill that you can actually debate. And it comes down to a fundamental question. Do you believe that strangers, and that's really strangers, professionals, even though they may be teachers, do you want them talking without parental notification to kindergartners about sex? And overwhelmingly, once you the American public does not believe this. And then they normally come out and say, well, we're not doing this. Or if there are some instances where we're doing this, this is about freedom of speech and everything else. And, some other excuse. I just think the freedom of speech thing is laughable because there's conservatives like the three of us, bigger stage people like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, that have made a good living off of going to these college campuses and fielding controversial questions, where their side always just wants to cut off the debate. I mean, when was the last time a liberal was actually censored on Twitter?
Yeah, so here's my thought process on this is when you pay your taxes, as you said, Brian, and you send your child to public school, you have a stake in the game, and the teachers cannot teach these things without parental consent. And ought not be teaching them at all, certainly not in kindergarten, as I think we all agree. Conversely, if you go to Disney, it's a private, it's a public company, but it's a private organization. It's a for-profit organization. You can pay to go there, or you can choose not to pay to go there. And Disney can do all kinds of things, which I actually predict that one of the things Disney's going to do, probably in our lifetime, is your kid's going to walk in there with you, and Mickey Mouse, is going to have breasts, right? And it's like, hey, would you kids like to touch Mickey Mouse's breasts? Because, he's the guy mouse. And the kids are like, I don't understand. Look, this is the left. The left, I hope they're listening to this podcast, because they will probably listen to this and go, oh, no. And others will go, oh, yes. This is what they want. They're trying to confuse 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. All they want to do is go to Disney World, hang out with Mickey Mouse or Minnie Mouse, take a picture with them because, it's cool and all that stuff, or Goofy or what have you. But Disney is going to sexualize these characters. They're already doing it. Thoughts?
And does this mean Minnie gets a penis?
Yes. Minnie will soon have a schmeckle. There's no doubt about that.
And once again, it really is. This is about family entertainment. This is why families wanted to go there. They don't want to go there to confuse their child about sexuality, because most kids at least understand that they are either a boy or a girl, and to show up and see a male mouse with breast is meant to do nothing but create chaos and confusion and force your screwed up way of thinking about the world onto an innocent child.
Certainly in Disney, the magic tunnel is going to have a different meaning.
That's
now.
right.
Well, but for a corporation the size of Disney that is based on like family values and did movies for you, because we all grew up with Disney, that have this like debate now. I mean, it's just mind blowing to me, because we had this debate about 10 years. It was called Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch.
Right.
That's Disney World now.
And I don't think any of us would send our children to Michael Jackson Neverland Ranch.
No. That's a really great point, Matt. That's a great analogy between Neverland.
The Home Alone kid turned out perfect.
Yes. No grooming going on at Neverland. No, I mean, it's like, yes, exactly.
How jealous
showers with Mickey Mouse,
right now.
So Chuck Todd of NBC News, we're talking about culture wars is a real problem for the Democrats. You heard the first clip from Chuck Todd asking Kimberly Atkins Starr of the Boston Globe a question. Here's Chuck Todd asking Anna Palmer. Now, Anna Palmer is the founder of Punch Bowl News. He asks her a question about the cultural wars in the United States of America. We have that clip, and here it is.
It's been astonishing to me that the Democrats haven't grabbed onto a libertarian attack on this, because this is big government telling people what to do. This is government saying they want to decide, they want to know what your kid's gender is. Like, no, it's not. Get out of my kid's bedroom.
But that's time and again what we're seeing Republicans do right now, whether it looks at what's happening in abortion and all these other cases. And I think Democrats are on their heels, particularly when it came to schools and COVID and mask requirements. And they have not figured out how to message around this. It seems to me, there's easy slogans you could push back on, but they have not found an animating slogan to kind of push back and get the public sentiment behind them.
Brian, Anna Palmer there, who you just heard, she's basically saying that children being taught transgenderism at 5 years old is the same thing as abortion.
These people are sick in the head. I really don't understand. Their thought process is so wicked and so evil that it's almost unfathomable to people like you and I that live a certain way of life where we believe in freedom and family. And these people believe they should be the one dictating how your child believes and what your child thinks. And it is so out of whack. And I think that's why we're going to see even in the coming election and elections beyond that people are going to finally reject this and say, this has gone way too far.
Because they're messing with people's children. And they're basically, I mean, it's just fun. Look, this is my personal opinion too. And I hope I get feedback on this. I don't even care if you have a 6th grader. And if you think even at 6th grade that your child can make any kind of decision about this matter and that they should be taught about the fact that they may not be the sex that's assigned to them and that you should surrender that education to somebody in public school to teach your child that, I think that's wrong too.
Well, parental rights, education for children, I mean, that's something that most normal people hold sacred, right? I mean, that's supposedly, we talked about taxes, we talked about public schooling. And we always thought like, hey, you become a member of the PTA and you vote for your local school board. And we'd have some choices here on this, on how our kids are educated. And right now, I think it's the first time in a real long time that I can remember where, we're always used to getting punched back. But this is a deal where average people are going up to their local school board member and going up to the meeting and saying, we don't like this. Why do you need to over-sexualize kindergartners?
Why do you need to sexualize it at all?
Period. And instead of the school board, it's just like we were talking about earlier with the Democratic Party reverting. Instead of them going, you know what, you're right, we're screwed up, we're going to take a second look at this. They come back and say, you know what, it's your fault. It's the parent's fault. Because we don't trust the parent to make the right decision. And we don't, because you're a racist, you're a homophobe. And your parents are homophobes, so we need this right to teach it to your kids. And look, I think the average person is like sitting back there going, whoa.
Exactly.
I mean, government is supposed to work for you, not against you. And the red wave that's coming, it should be a tsunami because these people should not have elected political power.
They should be as far away, these people, the Dems, from children as possible. I mean, I really believe this because it's, and I said this, earlier on at the beginning of the pandemic, it's like a cloak of evil has cast itself upon our continent. And because under what lifetime would you think that we would even be having this conversation? So before we go to you, Brian, here's NBC News correspondent Josh Lederman. This is also on Meet the Press, of course. Here's NBC News correspondent Josh Lederman talking about the issue of culture wars in America. We have that clip, and here it is.
And time and again, we've seen Democrats allow their messaging to almost be defined by the other side in a way that is so hard for them to then get out of. I mean, the problems with the polling on this mirror the problems that Democrats have in messaging on it. If you were to ask the average parent of a first grader, do you want your kid to be taught about sex in first grade? Most parents will probably say, probably not. But if you ask, is it okay for your kid to be read a book about, Peter the Penguin who has 2 penguin dads, you're not going to have the same kind of response. But Democrats have sort of ceded the argument on this on so many of these cultural
So that's
issues.
Josh Lederman of NBC News saying the real issue isn't the teaching of sex ed and sexualization in kindergarten and first grade. The real issue is how you're messaging it to the parents. Brian.
Well, let me just make one comment that popped in my head when that was playing. If you ever watched the Flight of the Penguin, those penguins walk like hundreds upon thousands of miles to find a mate. Do you think they would have walked hundreds of thousands of miles and then he's like, I decided I want to go with another male penguin? He could probably just stay back there and say, hey, how about you and I? We forget about making this
Peter the Penguin meets Dick the Penguin.
Yeah, that's right. You and I just sit back here and we'll just have a couple of nice cocktails together and get off on one another and let them go find the female penguins. It is crazy to me that they think this is okay. And let's remember, this is the party that when they revert back to 18 years old, they say, well, no, they're all too stupid to know what a student loan is, so we got to forgive them of that debt because they're not smart enough to make these decisions. But we can confuse them by telling them that there's two dads, penguins.
2 penguin dads,
two
right.
penguin dads that we should be teaching.
And that's going to be like something that you actually have to explain. So, Matt, you heard it's going to be hard to top this one.
That's going to be hard to top that one.
NBC News correspondent Josh Lederman was like, well, it's just a messaging issue. It's not whether you ought to be teaching sexualization and sex ed in first grade, because he used first grade as an example. He said, it's really just because we're not educating parents the right way and telling people that, it's okay to read a book about two penguins who are males getting married.
The paraphrase what he said was, well, if you phrase the question where do you want your first grader to talk about sex, most parents would probably say not. No, most parents would say no. But then if you read your child a book about two penguin fathers together, they would probably be okay. No. Why do you feel the need to push this on children that are not your own? These are not your kids.
Yes, and to confuse them even further, right? You're confusing them by teaching them this. And I want to make something clear to the Mark and Millennials audience out there. Once you were an adult, we don't care who you marry or what you do. We don't care. Those are your choices. But when did it happen, guys? When did it happen that the left decided that wasn't good enough? We got to go after kindergartners. Who gave them
the authority to do this?
Right.
And that's what needs to be brought back. I mean, we used to have manners in this country, and people used to be treated professionals. Teachers want to be treated like professionals. We hear this all the time with funding and stuff. They need to start speaking up against this. The union needs to start speaking up against it. And if they're not, well, then they need to be called out as well.
So, Brian, how would one of the pages read when Peter the Penguin meets Dick the Penguin? And they start reading this to the kids. And,
hey, how you doing?
That's right. That's a nice tuxedo you got on there. Is it cold in here or just me?
And that's Culture Wars is a real problem for Democrats. Next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is Big Oil Windfall Taxes Act. That's a long one, I know. It's called Big Oil Windfall Taxes Act. So what is that? Well, the Big Oil Windfall Taxes Act is basically saying that the oil companies throughout the planet are actually gouging people on prices, and they're making all this money, and that's the reason why prices are high at the pump. Folks, we can't make this stuff up, but we are going to clarify the record here on Mark the Millennials. So CNBC host on CNBC, that's a business channel for all those that don't know, Representative Jan Schakowsky was on there, and she is an anti-fracking person. And so CNBC host Joe Kernan confronted the Illinois Representative Jan Schakowsky on her vote to ban fracking. By the way, she also banned exports of natural gas as well. At least she voted for that. She wanted to get rid of all natural gas, which basically means all gas and all oil. Now, of course, she's receiving all of this heat back home. And she's receiving the heat back home because people are like, Congresswoman, I can't afford to fill up my car with gasoline. What gives? So if you want to see the ultimate two-step by a Democrat, here is Jan Schakowsky being grilled on CNBC about her desire to ban fracking. We have that clip, and here it is.
Many members of Congress, 26 members of the House, I don't know if you're one of them, voted to try to a bill to ban fracking as well as oil and natural gas exports. Were you one of the 26 House Democrats that voted to ban fracking as well as oil and gas production?
Look, the question is what are the oil companies doing? Yes, I am against fracking. I think it's a real problem.
Did you vote yes on that?
The question is that the oil companies made a decision, rather, in this crisis right now, to raise the cost, to gouge the consumers.
So, Brian, thoughts on this?
It's always a diversionary tactic, right? They always have to find some villain to blame instead of themselves because they've created this problem. And when she's talking about fracking, she goes, it's a big problem. Well, nobody wants to define what the problem is because nobody really understands how clean of an exploration of fracking really is for us to go get natural gas, because we are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. It is one of the cleanest energies we produce. We can export it. And if we export it, we can make it extremely cheap for ourselves, and we can power our houses. We can power our energy grids. She can hate it all she wants, but she's got no evidence to back up that fracking has ever caused a single problem, except for Sandra Bullock making some stupid movie in the 90s where, it hurt the oil. I mean, it hurt the water. It hurt the water.
The water's on fire.
Yeah, the water's on fire. Meanwhile, production in this country has gone up so much since we started to explore our own oil sources, our own natural gas sources, instead of relying.
It's a 50% tax. So the second that the oil company extracts the oil, there's a 50% tax levied by the federal government on that oil. That's what they want to do with this bill. I'm just curious, what's that going to do to the price of gasoline at the pump, Matt?
I just love when reality smacks these people in the face. I mean, look, you're telling me if you ban something or you excessively tax it, you'll get less of it. I mean, that's a revolutionary thought there. I mean, they all must have went to school with AOC. That's the only thing I can come up with, because their policies are just, they're pathetic at this point.
So here's what's really interesting about this. This is why we're covering this podcast, listeners, because you've heard other dumbest bills in America similar to this, but this is a new bill, and it's from Jan Schakowsky and Ro Khanna and a total of 26 Democrats who want to, and perhaps more, but 26 for sure, who want to ban everything that has to do with fossil fuels and put a massive tax on it. So now they're getting all of this heat back home. All right. The heat being from the constituents, and the constituents are saying, man, this is like crazy. Why are you doing this? And so Ro Khanna, okay, he's a congressman, went on Neil Cavuto. You're going to love these clips. Okay. I'm going to love these because he's a California congressman. He's in one of the most liberal districts in the country, and he's getting hammered back home. Here is Ro Khanna having an exchange with Neil Cavuto. We had the first of 3 clips. Here it is.
Congressman, great to see you. I know you're saying that, the oil companies could be doing more to help the situation we're having with gasoline by taxing their profits on this. Why do that? Why not just allow more exploration?
Well, first of all, I think we need an increase in short-term production. The president has released 180 million barrels, and I've said, let's have a floor price to buy that back, which would increase production. But also, these oil companies have $44 billion in stock buybacks, and I'm saying if they continue to charge American gas $6, $7 at the pump, then they should be taxed on those.
So that's Ro Khanna is like doing the 2-step. He's like, well, wait a minute. It's really all about the oil companies. That's why prices are really high at the pump. What he forgets is the Biden administration and Ro Khanna himself want to cancel gasoline. When you want to do that, and that is the policy of the United States Congress and of the president of the United States, you know what happens? The oil companies don't invest in new exploration. And Ro Khanna thinks you can just switch a button, like when you go into the kitchen and you turn the lights on, that's how it works with oil. No, Brian, doesn't, does it?
No, and when he's talking about trying to increase production by taxing something more, you're going to get less of it. You're never going to get more of it. And it just goes to show the ignorance of how a free market works. And they always want to create this boogeyman and say, look at him, it's his fault. Knowing clear well that maybe he doesn't know, maybe he is that ignorant that he doesn't understand how
he knows exactly what he's doing. And the thing is, Ro Khanna is really smart. He knows what he's doing is ultimately going to bankrupt the oil companies, and it will probably in the process bankrupt the American people. He knows he's doing it. The question is, why would you knowingly, when you're a really smart person, do it? Why would you knowingly do this?
Because the ends justify the means, right?
And the ends being what?
They want to do away with all fossil fuels altogether.
Resulting in basically a society that goes back 200 years in terms of your standard of living. But why would you do that, Matt? Why would you willingly do this to the people?
They hate this country. They feel that the country is founding on ill-gotten gains. And really, they just are out to destroy it. And you can say this guy is smart, but obviously he's a smart central planner. Right. And this is why every central planning government has eventually failed, because they can't do it. I haven't met a politician yet, and we're all politicians to some degree on the show right now, but I haven't met a single one that I want to make decisions for me.
No, that's for sure.
I mean, not a single one. And it's troublesome.
So here's another clip of Ro Khanna. You're going to love this exchange with Neil Cavuto. Folks, Neil Cavuto lights him up because Ro Khanna is smart enough to know what he's doing. He's literally crushing the economy of the United States of America and of every single citizen out there. Here's the clip.
Why limit it to just them, Congressman? What if food prices go up? Do you go after Cargill? Do you go after Philip Morris and all of this because they're making money in a higher environment, not as much money as you would think, given that run-up? But if you're going to go after a company and its profits when prices are high, why don't you extend that to everybody? If laptop prices rise, go after Apple or Dell. Why limit it to just the oil guys?
Well, everyone needs gas, and this is hurting the working class the most.
Everyone needs food as well. Everyone needs food as well. So why not go after
absolutely. If they were price gouging at the same level and having $40 billion in
Are you
price,
saying you have proof that they're price gouging, Congressman?
Well, I have proof that they are putting a lot of their money into stock buybacks, and I have proof that they are making record profits. Is that evil to do? Because there are a lot of people in your district who invest in oil companies and enjoy those dividends and get something out of that. It's not just for the hoi polloi, right? I agree with that, and they would have to be paying this tax as well, obviously, if they were investors in my district. I guess here's...
So that's Neil Cavuto saying to Ro Khanna, you have a big oil windfall taxes act bill. You want to tax them at 50% because you're saying they're making too much money, because you're blaming them. You're trying to divert attention, as you said, Brian, to the big oil versus, of course, the fact that the policies of the Democrat Party are canceling them. He's like, Neil Cavuto is like, well, why wouldn't you just tax the big food people because food prices are increasing because of energy prices?
Because they've always wanted to pick the winners and the losers, right? It's who falls in line with them, who believes in who's going to keep them in power. And we want to decide who wins, who loses. They don't like big oil. They want to put them out of business. They're just starting to feel the heat because average American says, well, we still need to drive our cars and we still need natural gas to heat our homes or to cool our houses. And you're putting a tremendous financial burden on us. Even the people on the far left are like, this is out of control. But he wants to sit on his laurels and say, no, I'm the smartest guy in the room. I'm going to decide which companies survive and which companies we put out of business. And that's his whole belief system.
Exactly. Matt.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right, Brian. I mean, this is where they're at, where they're going to pick the winners and losers. And there's just not a real good excuse for it. But I do love this guy. I mean, he's like a deer in the headlights, talking about somebody that hasn't maybe ever had a single Republican friend or maybe a conversation with somebody else. I mean, he's just like, yeah, we're just gonna ban this. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you ban other things? Well, because I like them. I mean, that's when it comes down to it.
And every time you talk to these woke Democrats like Ro Khanna and you say, well, how else would I drive? He's like, well, buy a Tesla. It's, well, here's the problem. Electricity prices in California are through the roof because you're canceling natural gas and so forth. And like, oh, well, that's not my problem. I want to save the planet. And it's just unbelievable. So we have the final clip in this series. Again, an exchange between Neil Cavuto and Ro Khanna. You're going to love it. Here it is.
In the meantime, we're talking to Venezuela and for a while Iran to rely on that. And if you're concerned about clean energy, relying on either of those kingdoms and countries for oil, which is among the dirtiest refined product on the planet, then it just doesn't make sense. The party's position just doesn't seem consistent.
Well, Neil, I agree with you. This is why we should have been investing in renewable energy years ago, so we wouldn't be dependent on Iran, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia. And this is why I'm
we just only recently got very dependent on that. That's a very recent phenomenon.
But certainly you would acknowledge, Neil, that none of President Biden's policies of the last year are responsible for that. You yourself said we're at the highest production. And if you ask anyone in the oil industry, they'll say it's Wall Street.
When he stopped Keystone, and you know oil is priced as supply and demand, that includes future supply and demand, and that was cut off. It sent a message on the first day of his administration, and he's verbalized this himself, that he's not too keen on all of this. That tells anyone invested in this that, look, opportunities are going to be few and far between. Right?
So that's now you know the messaging, ladies and gentlemen out there in podcast land. You hear the Democrats saying, it's not Joe Biden's fault. It's not our fault that prices are through the roof. That's why we have a big oil windfall taxes act to charge those terrible oil companies a 50% tax because they are just gouging you. And then you have Neil Cavuto saying, well, before President Biden became president, everything was fine. So obviously it's policy driven. Go ahead.
And that's one of the greatest accomplishments, I believe, in Donald Trump's 4 years, was to make us energy independent, because people were always talking about it, but we never did it. And he did it in less than 2 years. And you saw gas prices went down, energy prices went down. And the one thing about energy prices is we all rely on them. Unless you live in tent city, you're still relying on the public's energy, but we all need energy to be productive, to live our lives, to save lives. I mean, you talk about the hospital systems and all the energy that they need in order to operate in all of our critical infrastructure. It all runs off of energy. And he talks about renewable energy like we just don't have the guts to do it. But if you guys remember when Barack Obama went into place, do you remember Solyndra? You remember there was like 38 companies.
They all went bankrupt.
They all went bankrupt. And we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were literally giving hundreds of millions of dollars. Can you go please produce some wind energy or some solar energy? And you know what happened? They couldn't figure it out until this day. We only get less than 9% of our energy comes from solar or wind. They can wish it all they want.
Matt,
and the
final
free market,
word. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, they're
final word on Big Oil Windfall Taxes Act.
Well, they're trying to legislate clean energy. And look, it's just a mistake. It's not ready for prime time. And talking about just slamming your junk in the door on this. I mean, if you go back and look 30 years ago, right now, America pretty much has the same carbon output as we did back in the 90s. And one reason for that, it has because of fracking and removing like coal, electric plants,
catalytic converters.
Right. With natural gas and replacing that. And while we're on the path of the water certainly more clean, the air is more clean, they want to make the decision for you. They want to control your life. They're willing to be the ones that push the buttons of this utopia. And look, it's really troublesome, and it's not working out for the average American.
Go, Brian.
And it's a big lie. It is a big lie. They want to tell you that things have gotten worse, but they've actually gotten better. Technology and innovation has brought us so much further in clean energy. Look, we're Republicans. We believe in clean air. We believe in clean water. We believe
in all of the above and let them all compete. And I agree, by the way, with the Democrats saying, let's not subsidize big oil. I don't think they should be subsidized. But here's the thing. They're not subsidized at the state level, at least in our state at all. The only people that are subsidized are, of course, the wind and solar.
But we also realize that somebody like Elon Musk in the private sector has done more for the environment than any government program has been set up.
That's true. And that's the last word. And that's the dumbest bill in America. And that's it from Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins, and our guests, Matt Morgan and Brian Chisholm. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.